The smell of burning cedar mixed with sage smoke as Adelaide Anderson watched her father's land deed turn to ash in the town clerk's fireplace. Her 22 years of memories reduced to nothing but cinders and legal jargon that meant she could not inherit what should have been rightfully hers. Chico, California had been her home since before she could walk, but in the spring of 1867, women like her could not own property under their own name, and her father had died without a will, leaving everything to distant male cousins who wanted nothing to do with cattle ranching but everything to do with selling the land for a quick profit. Adelaide stood in that cramped office with its peeling wallpaper and dust-covered law books, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. The clerk, a balding man named Henderson who had known her father for 30 years, would not even meet her eyes as he explained that the law was the law, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The cousins from Boston had already signed the papers. The land would be sold within the month. She walked out of that office into the bright California sunshine, the heat hitting her face like a physical blow. The main street of Chico stretched before her, horses tied to hitching posts, men loading supplies into wagons, women in their proper dresses walking with parasols. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but Adelaide's entire world had shifted on its axis. The ranch had been everything. 300 acres of good grazing land, a house her father had built with his own hands, cattle that bore the Anderson brand. Now it would all belong to strangers who saw it as nothing more than dollar signs. She made her way to the general store, needing something to do with her hands, needing to be around people even if she could not bear to speak to anyone. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and Martha Wilkins looked up from behind the counter with sympathy already pooling in her eyes. News traveled fast in small towns. "Adelaide, honey," I heard. "I am so sorry." Adelaide managed a nod, moving between the shelves without really seeing what was there. Flour, sugar, coffee, all the things that made up daily life, all the things that seemed pointless now. The door chimed again and she heard boots on the wooden floor, spurs jingling softly. She did not turn around, did not care who had entered. "I need supplies for a month, Martha," a male voice said, deep and warm like honey. "I am heading up to the northern pasture tomorrow." "Of course, Dalton. Let me get that together for you." Adelaide found herself near the window, staring out at the street. She had about $40 to her name, enough to last a few weeks if she was careful. After that, she would need to find work. Maybe as a seamstress or a schoolteacher, though the teaching position was already filled. The thought of leaving Chico, of abandoning the land her father had loved, made her stomach turn. "Miss Anderson." She turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, hat in his hands. He was tall, probably close to 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of strong coffee. She recognized him vaguely, had seen him around town but never spoken to him. "I am Dalton Barrett," he said. "I ranch about 15 miles north of here. I knew your father not well, but I respected him. I heard what happened. It is not right." "No, it is not," Adelaide said, surprised her voice came out steady. "But apparently right does not matter much when the law is involved." Dalton shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but determined to continue. "I do not mean to intrude, but I wanted you to know if you need anything, work or help or just someone to talk to, you can find me at the Barrett Ranch. I mean that sincerely." Adelaide studied him, looking for the angle, the catch. Men did not offer help without expecting something in return. But his eyes were steady and honest, and she found herself nodding. "Thank you. That is kind." He nodded back, settling his hat on his head. "I mean it, Miss Anderson. I know we do not know each other, but your father was a good man, and this whole situation sits wrong with me." He collected his supplies from Martha and left, and Adelaide watched him ride away on a sturdy bay horse, wondering what had possessed him to offer help to a stranger. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of packing and sorting. The cousins sent word that Adelaide could take her personal belongings and nothing else. No cattle, no horses except her father's old mare who was too old to be worth much, no equipment. They were generous enough to give her 2 weeks to clear out before the new owners took possession. Adelaide packed her mother's dishes, her father's books, the few pieces of jewelry her grandmother had left her. Everything else, all the furniture built by hand, the rugs her mother had woven, the tools her father had used, would be sold with the property. She was in the barn on her last day, saying goodbye to the horses she had raised from foals, when she heard a wagon approaching. Her heart sank, thinking the new owners had come early to push her out, but when she walked outside, she found Dalton Barrett climbing down from a sturdy wagon, 2 ranch hands with him. "Miss Anderson," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I came to help you move your things. Figured you might need some assistance." Adelaide stared at him. "I did not ask for your help. No, you did not, but I am offering it anyway. Where are you moving to?" The question hung in the air. Adelaide swallowed hard. "I have a room at the boarding house in town. For now." Dalton's expression did not change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Understanding, maybe. Pity, possibly. She bristled at both. "A boarding house is no place for long-term living," he said carefully. "Have you thought about what comes next?" "Every moment of every day," Adelaide shot back. "But thinking and being able to do something about it are 2 different things." Dalton nodded slowly. "What if I made you an offer? Hear me out before you say no." Adelaide crossed her arms. "I am listening. I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper left last month to move back east with her daughter, and I have been managing on my own, but it is too much. I am out with the cattle from dawn to dusk most days, and the house is falling apart. I need someone to manage things, someone who knows ranching and is not afraid of hard work. Room and board plus $30 a month. It was a generous offer, more than generous, suspiciously so. "Why me?" Adelaide asked. "There are plenty of women in town who need work." "Because you know cattle," Dalton said simply. "You grew up on a ranch, you understand the life. And because I think you deserve better than what happened to you, and this is the only help I can offer that would not be charity." Adelaide wanted to refuse on principle. She did not know this man, did not know what kind of person he was, or what he might expect from her beyond housekeeping. But the alternative was the boarding house and whatever menial work she could find in town, slowly watching her savings dwindle until she had nothing left. "I want it clear that this is strictly a business arrangement," she said firmly. "I will not tolerate any impropriety." "You have my word," Dalton said, meeting her eyes without flinching. "I am offering you honest work, nothing more. You will have your own quarters, locked door, complete privacy. And if at any point you are uncomfortable or want to leave, I will pay you what you are owed and drive you back to town myself, no questions asked." Adelaide studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. She found none. "All right," she said finally. "I accept your offer." They loaded her belongings into the wagon, the sum of her life fitting into a space that seemed impossibly small. Her father's books, her mother's quilts, the small trunk of clothes, a few precious photographs in frames. That was all she had left of the Anderson legacy. As they drove away from the ranch, Adelaide did not look back. She could not bear to see it disappearing behind her. The Barrett ranch was smaller than her father's spread, but well maintained. The house was a solid structure of pine logs with a wide porch and real glass windows, the kind that cost money. The barn was in good repair, and she counted about 40 head of cattle in the near pasture, all looking healthy and well fed. Dalton's ranch hands helped unload her things into a small room at the back of the house. It had a real bed with a thick mattress, a chest of drawers, a small desk by the window, and a door with a lock and key, just as he had promised. It was simple but clean, more comfortable than the boarding house would have been. "Kitchen is through there," Dalton said, pointing. "Help yourself to whatever you need. I usually eat at dawn and dusk, simple fare, nothing fancy. There is a root cellar out back, spring house for keeping things cool. If you need anything from town, make a list and I will pick it up, or take the wagon yourself if you prefer." Adelaide nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden change. Just this morning she had woken up in her childhood bedroom for the last time. Now she was standing in a stranger's house, agreeing to keep his home for wages. "I will let you settle in," Dalton said, backing toward the door. "I have to check on the cattle in the north pasture. We'll be back by dark. There is stew left from yesterday if you are hungry." Then he was gone, and Adelaide was alone in the quiet house. She sat down on the bed, her hands in her lap, and for the first time since her father's death, she let herself cry. Not soft tears, but hard, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. She cried for her father, for the land she had lost, for the unfairness of laws made by men who never considered that women might deserve the same rights. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she washed her face in the basin and started unpacking her things. If this was her life now, she would make the best of it. The first week was an adjustment. Dalton was up before dawn every day, and Adelaide rose with him, making coffee and biscuits, frying salt pork and eggs. He ate quickly and was out the door with barely a word, spending his days riding fence lines or moving cattle, or doing the 1,000 other tasks that ranching required. He came back after dark, dusty and exhausted, ate whatever she had prepared, and went to his own room at the far end of the house. They barely spoke beyond necessities. He would tell her if he needed supplies from town, or if the ranch hands would be coming for a meal, or if he would be gone overnight. She would inform him of repairs needed, of supplies running low, of problems with the spring house or the root cellar. It was a business arrangement, nothing more. But Adelaide found herself noticing things about him despite herself. The way he was always gentle with the horses, speaking to them in a low, soothing voice. The way he paid his ranch hands fairly and treated them with respect, regardless of their background. One of his hands was a former slave named Samuel who had headed west after the war, and Dalton spoke to him the same way he spoke to everyone else, with straightforward honesty and no pretension. She noticed that Dalton never raised his voice, even when frustrated, that he mended his own clothes rather than expecting her to do it, that he always thanked her for meals, even though cooking was part of her job. Small things, but they added up to a picture of a man who was fundamentally decent. A month passed, then two. Adelaide fell into the rhythm of ranch life, the endless cycle of chores and meals and maintenance. She found she liked the work, liked feeling useful. She expanded the kitchen garden, putting in vegetables that would store well through winter. She organized the chaotic pantry, fixed the sagging shelves in the root cellar, mended the curtains that were falling apart. She also started helping with the cattle when Dalton was short-handed. She could ride as well as any man, had been doing it since she was 5 years old, and she knew how to read cattle, how to spot a sick cow or a heifer in trouble. Dalton had been surprised the first time she had saddled up and joined them, but he had not argued, just nodded and put her to work. It was during one of these long days on horseback, moving a small herd to fresh pasture, that she and Dalton finally had a real conversation. "You are good with cattle," he said as they paused to let the animals drink from a creek. "Better than some men I have hired." "My father taught me," Adelaide said. "He wanted sons but got me instead. He decided I would have to do." "He made the right choice," Dalton said. "I have seen plenty of men who did not know a cow from a fence post." Adelaide smiled despite herself. "Did you grow up ranching?" Dalton shook his head. "My father was a shopkeeper in Sacramento. I worked for other ranchers for years, saved every penny, bought this place 5 years ago. It is not much, but it is mine." "It is a good ranch," Adelaide said. "You have built something solid." "I am trying," Dalton said. "Some days it feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but I cannot imagine doing anything else now." They rode in comfortable silence after that, and Adelaide realized she enjoyed his company. He did not fill every moment with chatter, did not feel the need to prove anything. He was simply himself, steady and reliable. That evening, as she was preparing supper, Dalton came into the kitchen with a serious expression. "Adelaide, I need to talk to you about something." Her stomach dropped. Was he going to tell her to leave? Had she done something wrong? "I got a letter today," Dalton continued, "from a cattle buyer in San Francisco. He wants to purchase 30 head, good price, but I need to deliver them next month. It is a 3-week trip there and back. I will need to take Samuel and the other hands with me." "All right," Adelaide said slowly, not seeing the problem. "That means you would be here alone," Dalton said. "I do not like the idea, but I do not have much choice. The money from this sale would set me up well for winter. But if you are not comfortable staying here by yourself, we can figure something else out. Maybe you could stay in town while I am gone." Adelaide considered. The ranch would need someone to look after it, to feed the chickens and milk the cow, to keep an eye on the few cattle left behind. "I can manage on my own," she said. "I have done it before, are you sure? It is remote out here. Nearest neighbor is 5 miles away." "I am sure," Adelaide said firmly. "I have my father's rifle and I know how to use it. I will be fine." Dalton looked relieved. "I will pay you extra for the responsibility, and I will leave the 2 horses so you can ride to town if you need anything." "When do you leave?" "Week from Monday. I am sorry for the short notice." "Do not apologize," Adelaide said. "This is your livelihood. I understand." The week passed quickly as Dalton prepared for the drive. He and the hands spent long days gathering the cattle that would make the journey, checking their health, getting everything ready. Adelaide helped where she could, and in the evenings, Dalton showed her which cattle to keep an eye on, which fence lines were weak, what to do in case of various emergencies. The night before he left, they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the hills. The air was cooling, autumn starting to creep in around the edges of summer. "I want to thank you," Dalton said quietly, "for everything you have done here. I know you took this position because you did not have much choice, but you have made this place feel like a real home. I appreciate that more than I can say." Adelaide felt warmth spread through her chest. "You gave me a chance when I had nowhere else to go. I am the one who should be thanking you." "Maybe we are both grateful then," Dalton said, and she heard the smile in his voice even though she was not looking at him. They sat in comfortable silence until the last light faded from the sky, and then Dalton stood, stretching his back. "I should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow." "Be safe," Adelaide said. "Come back in one piece." "I intend to," Dalton said. "You stay safe too. And Adelaide, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, do not hesitate to ride to town or to the neighbor's place. Promise me." "I promise," Adelaide said, touched by his concern. She stood on that same porch the next morning, watching Dalton and his men drive the cattle out, heading west toward San Francisco. The ranch felt suddenly very empty, very quiet. Adelaide stood there until they disappeared over the hill, and then she got to work. The first few days alone were strange. She was busy from sunrise to sunset with chores, but the evenings stretched long and lonely. She read by lamplight, worked on mending, wrote letters to old friends who had moved away. The ranch was peaceful, the only sounds the wind in the trees and the occasional cry of a coyote in the distance. On the fourth day, she was feeding the chickens when she heard a horse approaching. She tensed, hand moving instinctively to the rifle she now carried everywhere. But the rider was Samuel, Dalton's ranch hand, looking dusty and tired. "Miss Anderson," he called as he dismounted. "Is everything all right?" "Fine," Adelaide said, confused. "What are you doing back?" "Mr. Barrett sent me. We got a day out and he started worrying about you being here alone. Sent me back to keep an eye on things, make sure you had help if you needed it." Adelaide did not know whether to be touched or annoyed. She settled on touched. "That was not necessary, but I appreciate the thought. Are you hungry?" Samuel grinned. "Starving, madam." "Trail food does not compare to your cooking." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Samuel handled the heavier repairs and kept watch at night, sleeping in the bunkhouse. Adelaide managed the house and the day-to-day chores. They ate meals together, and Adelaide found she enjoyed the company, enjoyed having someone to talk to. Samuel had been born into slavery in Georgia, had fought with the Union Army, and headed west after the war looking for a fresh start. He had worked for Dalton for 2 years and spoke highly of him. "He is a fair man," Samuel said one evening over supper. "Some of the other ranchers, they would not hire me, or they would pay me half what they paid white workers. Mr. Barrett pays everyone the same, treats everyone decent. That means something. He seems like a good man," Adelaide agreed. "I am grateful he took a chance on me." "He talks about you sometimes," Samuel said, then looked like he regretted saying it. "I should not have mentioned that," but Adelaide's curiosity was piqued. "What does he say?" Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "Just that you are a hard worker, that you understand ranching better than most, that it was not right, what happened with your father's land." Adelaide felt that warmth in her chest again, the one that appeared whenever she thought about Dalton's kindness. She pushed it down, reminding herself this was just a job, just a temporary situation until she could figure out something better. Except she was starting to realize she did not want something better. She liked this life, liked this ranch, liked the man who owned it, if she was being honest with herself. The 3 weeks stretched long. Adelaide found herself watching the road, hoping to see Dalton and the others returning. She told herself it was just because she wanted confirmation they had made the trip safely, but she knew it was more than that. She missed him, missed his quiet presence, his steady calm, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. Finally, on a bright October morning, she heard the sound of horses and men's voices. She hurried outside to see Dalton and the hands riding in, looking exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," Dalton called out, grinning broadly. "Got a good price, too. Better than I hoped." Adelaide found herself grinning back, relief flooding through her. Welcome home. Home. The word hung in the air between them, and Dalton's smile softened into something warmer. It is good to be back. The ranch felt right again with everyone there. That evening, Adelaide cooked a celebration supper, using some of their precious stores to make a proper roast with potatoes and carrots, biscuits with honey, even a dried apple pie. The men ate with enthusiasm, swapping stories about the drive. After the hands had gone to the bunkhouse, Dalton helped Adelaide clean up, which he had never done before. They worked in comfortable silence, washing and drying dishes, putting things away. "I want to give you something," Dalton said suddenly. "Wait here." He disappeared into his room and came back with a small leather pouch. "Your wages for while I was gone, plus extra for managing the place." but also this. He poured something into her hand. Gold coins, more than she had expected. "Dalton, this is too much," she protested. "It is exactly right," he said firmly. "The sale went well, better than expected, and you kept this place running while I was gone. Samuel told me how hard you worked. You earned every penny." Adelaide closed her fingers around the coins, feeling the weight of them. With this money added to what she had already saved, she had real options now. She could rent a place in town, maybe even start a small business. She could have her independence. The thought made her feel hollow instead of excited. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. You have been incredibly generous." "Adelaide," Dalton said, and something in his voice made her look up. His dark eyes were intense, searching her face. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" The question surprised her. "Yes," she said honestly. "I did not expect to be, but I am." "Good," Dalton said, "because I have been thinking the whole 3 weeks on the trail. I have been thinking about something." Adelaide's heart started beating faster. "What?" Dalton took a deep breath. "This is going to sound sudden, and maybe it is too forward, but I need to say it. These months with you here, this has been the happiest I have been since I bought this ranch. You fit here, like you were always meant to be here. And I realize that is not just because you are a good housekeeper or because you know cattle. It is because you are you." Adelaide could not breathe, could not move. "I think I am falling in love with you," Dalton said quietly. "I know you came here because you had no choice, and I know you might not feel the same way. But I needed to be honest. I care about you, Adelaide, more than I should probably care about an employee." The words hung in the air between them, huge and impossible and wonderful. "I feel the same way," Adelaide whispered. "I have been trying trying to keep this professional, but I feel the same way." The smile that spread across Dalton's face was like sunrise. "Really?" "Really," Adelaide said, and then he was stepping closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle and questioning. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," Adelaide breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. They stood in the kitchen, holding each other, and Adelaide felt like something had clicked into place. This was where she was meant to be. Not in her father's house, not managing her own ranch, but here, with this man who had seen her at her lowest and offered her not pity but partnership. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly if you will let me." "We have been living in the same house for months," Adelaide said, laughing. "I think we are past proper courtship." "Still," Dalton said, "you deserve to be wooed. You deserve everything." And so he courted her, even though they saw each other every day, even though they already knew each other's habits and quirks. He picked wildflowers and left them on her pillow. He saved her the best pieces of meat at dinner. He taught her to play chess in the evenings, and she taught him the songs her mother had sung. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing their histories, their dreams, their fears. The ranch hands figured it out within days, but they were discreet, giving Dalton and Adelaide space while still being friendly. Samuel told Adelaide privately that he had never seen Dalton so happy, and that he thought they were good together. A month after Dalton's return from San Francisco, he took Adelaide on a picnic to a beautiful spot overlooking a valley. They ate cold chicken and bread, drank cider, talked lazily in the warm autumn sunshine. When they had finished eating, Dalton took her hand, his expression nervous. "Adelaide Anderson," he said, "I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you never give up even when everything is stacked against you. I love the life we have been building together. I want to make it official. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Adelaide said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." Dalton pulled a ring from his pocket, simple gold with a small garnet stone. "It was my mother's," he said. "It is not much, but it is perfect," Adelaide said, holding out her hand so he could slip it on. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Chico, with Samuel and the other ranch hands as witnesses, and half the town in attendance because everyone loved a wedding. Adelaide wore a simple blue dress, the best she owned, and Dalton wore his good suit. The ceremony was short, the words traditional, but when the preacher said they were man and wife, Adelaide felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was her family now. This was her home. They had a celebration at the ranch afterward, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. The neighbors came, and the townspeople, and everyone wished them well. As the sun set and the party wound down, Dalton pulled Adelaide into a dance, just the two of them swaying under the stars. "Happy," he murmured into her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Adelaide said honestly. "Good," Dalton said, "because I have something else to tell you." Adelaide pulled back to look at him. "What?" "I went to see a lawyer in Sacramento last week. I did not want to say anything until I was sure it was possible, but I have been working on something." "Dalton, what did you do?" He smiled, that soft smile she loved. "I am putting the ranch in your name, all of it, the land, the cattle, the house, everything." Adelaide stared at him. "What? You cannot do that. The ranch is yours. You worked for years to buy it." "And now it is yours," Dalton said firmly. "Or ours, really. We are married now, so it is all shared anyway. But legally, I want your name on those papers. You deserve to own land, Adelaide. The law says you cannot inherit, but there is nothing stopping me from gifting it to you as my wife." "But that is insane," Adelaide protested. "What if something happens? What if we, I do not know, grow apart or something goes wrong? You will have nothing." "Nothing is going to go wrong," Dalton said. "But even if it did, even if the worst happened, I want you protected. I want you to have security, to never be in the position you were in after your father died. I love you, Adelaide. This is how I can prove it." Tears were streaming down Adelaide's face. "I do not know what to say." "Say yes," Dalton said. "Say you will let me do this one thing, this one right thing in a world that has been so wrong to you." "Yes," Adelaide whispered. "Yes, thank you." They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead, and Adelaide felt a fierce gratitude for this man who had seen her struggle and decided to do something about it, even though it cost him nothing and everything at the same time. The papers were finalized a month later. Adelaide Anderson Barrett, legal owner of 300 acres of grazing land, a house, a barn, livestock, and equipment. It felt surreal to see her name on those documents, to know that she had what had been denied her before. "How does it feel?" Dalton asked as they rode the property line together, checking fences. "Strange," Adelaide admitted. "Wonderful, but strange. I keep thinking someone is going to appear and tell me it is a mistake." "No mistake," Dalton said. "This is real. You are a landowner now." Adelaide laughed. "We are landowners. This is ours together." "However you want to think of it," Dalton said, "as long as you are happy." Winter came, cold and harsh. They spent long evenings by the fire, Adelaide sewing or reading while Dalton worked on ranch accounts or repaired equipment. They learned each other's rhythms, the little compromises that made a marriage work. Dalton learned that Adelaide needed time alone sometimes, space to think. Adelaide learned that Dalton processed problems by talking them through, needing her to listen even when she could not offer solutions. They had their first real argument in January, a fight about whether to buy more cattle or save the money for improvements to the house. Adelaide thought they needed a bigger barn first. Dalton argued that more cattle meant more income, which would pay for the barn and then some. They went to bed angry, lying on opposite sides of the bed in tense silence. But in the morning, Dalton reached for her, pulling her close. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have listened to your opinion more. You know ranching as well as I do." "I am sorry too," Adelaide said. "I was being stubborn. We can compromise, buy some cattle and save some for the barn." "Deal," Dalton said, and kissed her until she forgot they had been fighting at all. Spring brought new calves and a flurry of work. Adelaide discovered she was pregnant in April, the realization dawning slowly as her monthly courses stopped and morning sickness began. She told Dalton one evening over dinner, suddenly nervous about how he would react. "I am going to be a father." He asked, his face cycling through shock, joy, and something like terror. "In about 7 months, yes," Adelaide said. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Dalton came around the table, pulling her to her feet and spinning her around. "I am thrilled. We are having a baby." He set her down carefully, suddenly gentle. "Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working?" Adelaide laughed at his concern. "I am fine. Pregnant women have been working since the dawn of time. I am not made of glass, still," Dalton said. "I want you to take it easy. No heavy lifting, no riding difficult horses." "We will see," Adelaide said, but she was touched by his protectiveness. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Adelaide worked through the summer, though she let the ranch hands take over the harder tasks. She grew large and uncomfortable as autumn approached, her back aching and her feet swelling. Dalton was endlessly patient, rubbing her feet in the evenings and never complaining when she could not sleep, and kept him up with her tossing and turning. Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving fast and furious after only 6 hours of labor. Dalton held Adelaide's hand through it all, looking pale but determined. When the midwife placed the baby in Adelaide's arms, tiny and red-faced and wailing, Adelaide felt her heart expand to impossible dimensions. "He is perfect," she whispered. "Just like his mother," Dalton said, his eyes wet with tears. They named him Daniel after Dalton's father. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and he was the center of their world from the moment he drew breath. The first year was exhausting. Adelaide had forgotten how much work a baby was, how little sleep you could function on. But Dalton was a devoted father, walking the floor with Daniel when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, playing with him for hours. Watching him with their son made Adelaide fall in love with him all over again. Daniel was walking by his first birthday, stumbling around on chubby legs, getting into everything. He was fearless and curious, traits that gave Adelaide heart attacks on a regular basis. "He is just like you," Dalton said one afternoon after rescuing Daniel from trying to climb into the chicken coop. "He is nothing like me," Adelaide protested. "I was a very well-behaved child." Dalton gave her a look that said he did not believe that for a second. Life fell into a rhythm. Daniel grew, the ranch prospered, and Adelaide and Dalton's love deepened into something steady and unshakable. They had their challenges, of course. A drought one summer that had them selling off some cattle. A winter so harsh they lost several animals to cold and starvation. The everyday struggles of making a life in a wild, unforgiving place. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. When Daniel was 3, Adelaide found herself pregnant again. Their daughter was born in the spring, a sunny May morning that felt like a promise. They named her Grace, and she was sweet-tempered and cheerful from the start, the complete opposite of her rambunctious brother. 2 children made life even more chaotic, but Adelaide had never been happier. She would look around sometimes, at her children playing, at Dalton working with the horses, at the land that was legally hers, and marvel at how far she had come. From losing everything to having more than she had ever dreamed. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, the children finally asleep inside. "How lucky I am," Adelaide said. "How different my life is from what I thought it would be." "Better or worse?" Dalton asked, though his smile said he already knew the answer. "So much better," Adelaide said. "That day in the clerk's office when I watched my father's deed burn, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. And now I know I had not lost everything. I had just lost one path, and it led me to a better one." Dalton took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I love you, Adelaide Barrett. I loved you the day I first saw you in the general store, looking lost and angry and beautiful. I loved you when you agreed to work here, even though you were terrified. I loved you when you accepted my proposal. And I love you more every single day." "I love you too," Adelaide said. "Thank you for putting the ranch in my name, for giving me something the law said I could not have. You deserved it," Dalton said simply. "You deserve to own property, to have security, to be more than just someone's daughter or someone's wife, though I am glad you are my wife." "Me too," Adelaide said, leaning into him. "Me too." Years passed. Daniel grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Grace was gentle and artistic, preferring to draw and paint rather than ride horses, and Adelaide and Dalton supported both their children's passions equally. They had one more child, another son they named Samuel after the ranch hand who had become one of their closest friends. Little Samuel was born when Adelaide was 33, a surprise baby who completed their family perfectly. The ranch grew over the years. They bought the adjacent property when it came up for sale, expanding their holdings. Adelaide proved to be a shrewd businesswoman, negotiating good prices for their cattle and managing their finances with a careful eye. Dalton handled the day-to-day ranching, and together they built something substantial, something lasting. They faced sorrows too, as all lives do. Samuel, the ranch hand, passed away when Adelaide was 38, succumbing to pneumonia despite the doctor's best efforts. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the valley, and Adelaide cried as hard as she had at her father's funeral. He had been family, had been there from almost the beginning of her life with Dalton. Adelaide's old neighbors from her father's ranch sometimes stopped by, and she heard news of what had become of the Anderson property. The Boston cousins had sold it quickly to a developer who divided it up into smaller parcels. The house her father had built was torn down, replaced with a newer structure that had no soul, no history. It hurt to hear, but Adelaide realized she had made peace with it. Her father's land was gone, but she had built something new, something that belonged to her in a way the old ranch never could have. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Dalton took Adelaide back to the spot where he had proposed. It was spring, the valley below covered in wildflowers, the air warm and full of the scent of growing things. 15 years, Dalton said, shaking his head. "Sometimes it feels like forever, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday." "I know what you mean," Adelaide said. "I cannot imagine my life without you." "You will never have to," Dalton said. "I am not going anywhere." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the clouds drift across the sky. 3 children, a successful ranch, a life full of love and purpose. It was more than Adelaide had ever dreamed possible on that awful day when she had lost her father's land. "You ever regret it?" Adelaide asked suddenly. "Putting the ranch in my name, giving up legal ownership?" Dalton looked at her surprised. "Never, not for a single moment. Why would I?" "I do not know. I just think about how radical it was, how it could have gone wrong in so many ways." "But it did not go wrong," Dalton said. "It went exactly right. You deserve to own property, Adelaide. You deserve that power, that security. I will never regret giving you what should have been yours by right from the beginning." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, his words still moved her. "You are a remarkable man, Dalton Barrett." "I am just a man who loves his wife," Dalton said. Nothing remarkable about that. But it was remarkable, Adelaide thought. In a time when women had so few rights, when the law saw them as property themselves, Dalton had chosen to do something different. He had chosen to see her as an equal, as a partner, as someone capable and worthy of ownership and power. That choice had changed her life. They stayed on that hillside until the sun began to set, then rode back to the ranch together. Their children were waiting for them. Dinner already started because Daniel had learned to cook from his mother and had taken over the kitchen for the evening. They ate together as a family, talking and laughing, and Adelaide looked around the table at these people she loved more than life itself. "I am grateful," she said suddenly, and everyone stopped to look at her. "I am grateful for all of you, for this life we have built, for every single moment that led us here." "We are grateful for you too, Mama," Grace said, and the others murmured agreement. Later that night, lying in bed with Dalton's arms around her, Adelaide thought about gratitude, about the strange paths life took, about how loss could lead to finding, about how sometimes the worst moments led to the best ones. She had lost her father's land, had been denied her inheritance by laws that saw women as lesser. But that loss had brought her here, to this man, this life, this ranch that bore her name. She had everything she needed, everything she had ever wanted, and so much more besides. The ranch continued to thrive as the years passed. Daniel took on more responsibility, learning from both his parents, preparing to eventually take over the operation. Grace married a kind schoolteacher and moved to Chico, but she visited often with her own children. Samuel, the youngest, showed an aptitude for horse breeding and started building that side of the business. Adelaide and Dalton grew older together, their hair silvering, their faces showing the wear of decades of sun and wind and hard work. But they were happy, deeply and completely happy. They sat on the porch every evening, weather permitting, holding hands and watching the sunset, comfortable in the silence of people who had spent a lifetime learning each other. On their 30th anniversary, Dalton presented Adelaide with a new deed. She looked at it, confused. "What is this?" "The ranch," Dalton said. "I am signing over my remaining interest, making it completely and entirely yours. No strings, no shared ownership, just yours." "Dalton, you already put it in my name decades ago. We have been running it together this whole time. Why would you do this now?" "Because I want it clear," Dalton said. "I want it on paper, undeniable, that this ranch belongs to you, Adelaide Barrett. Built by your labor, expanded by your intelligence, managed by your skill. When I am gone, I do not want there to be any question, any confusion. This is yours to pass to our children or do with as you wish." "You are not going anywhere," Adelaide said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "Not for a long time, I hope," Dalton said. "But eventually. And when that day comes, I want you protected, I want you secure. I want you to never face what you faced when your father died." Adelaide looked at the papers, then at her husband, this man who had spent 30 years proving his love not just with words but with actions, with sacrifice, with the radical choice to give her power in a world that tried to strip it away. "Thank you," she whispered. "For this, for everything, for choosing me." "It was the easiest choice I ever made," Dalton said. "You were always the one, Adelaide, from that very first day." They celebrated that anniversary with their whole family. Children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a party that lasted 2 days. There was music and dancing and stories about the old days, about how Adelaide and Dalton had met, about the early struggles and triumphs. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, unable to imagine a time when their grandmother could not own property, when she had to rely on the generosity of a man who believed in her. "Grandpa was ahead of his time," Daniel said at one point, raising a glass in toast. "He was just decent," Adelaide corrected. "He did what should have been normal, what everyone should have done." "Still," Daniel insisted, "it was remarkable. You both were remarkable." As Adelaide looked around at her family, at the ranch that had been built with sweat and determination and love, she had to agree. Maybe it was remarkable. Maybe fighting against unjust laws, choosing to see women as equals, building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection was remarkable in 1867. In 1897, would be remarkable even in the new century that was dawning. But it was also simple. It was choosing love over law, compassion over convention, righteousness over regulation. It was Dalton seeing a woman who had lost everything and deciding to give her a chance. It was Adelaide taking that chance and building something magnificent from it. More years passed in the gentle rhythm of a well-lived life. Dalton's health began to fail when he was 68, his strong body finally giving in to age and hard work. Adelaide nursed him through his final illness with the same devotion he had shown her throughout their marriage. He died peacefully one spring morning, the windows opened to let in the smell of wildflowers. His family gathered around him. "I love you," he whispered to Adelaide with his last breath. "My remarkable wife." "I love you too," Adelaide said, holding his hand. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me." Losing Dalton was the hardest thing Adelaide had ever endured. She mourned deeply, wearing black for a full year, feeling his absence like a physical wound. But she did not fall apart. She could not, because he had made sure she would not have to. The ranch was hers, completely and legally hers. She had security, had independence, had the ability to take care of herself and help her children. She ran the ranch for another 15 years, staying active and involved until her own body began to fail. At 83, she finally stepped back, letting Daniel take full control while she moved into a smaller cottage on the property. She spent her final years surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, telling stories about the old days, about the cowboy who had put everything in her name when the law said she could own nothing. Adelaide Anderson Barrett died peacefully in her sleep at 87, on the land that bore her name, in the home she had built with the man she loved. Her legacy lived on in her descendants, in the ranch that continued to thrive, in the example she had set of strength and resilience and the power of partnership. At her funeral, Daniel read from a letter she had written to be opened after her death. "I lost everything once," she had written. "Or so I thought. But I learned that what we think we have lost is sometimes just making room for what we are meant to find. I found love when I expected to find only labor. I found home when I thought I was homeless. I found myself when I thought I had been erased. And I found a partner who saw me not as a woman who could not own property, but as a person who deserved to own everything." That was Dalton's gift to me, not just the land and the house and the ranch, but the belief that I was worthy of ownership, of power, of autonomy. He gave me what the law would not, and in doing so, he gave me my life back. I am grateful for every moment, every struggle, every triumph. I am grateful for the loss that led me to finding. And I am grateful most of all for the cowboy who saw a woman in trouble and decided to do something remarkable about it. He put everything in my name when the world said I could not own anything. And in doing so, he gave me the most precious gift of all, the freedom to be fully myself. The family gathered on that hillside where Dalton had proposed so many decades before, laying Adelaide to rest beside him. The valley stretched out below, still covered in wildflowers every spring, still beautiful and wild and free. The ranch continued, passed down through generations, but it always bore Adelaide's name on the deed. Her great-great-grandchildren would walk that land and know the story of the woman who could not inherit and the man who made sure she did anyway. They would know about love that challenges injustice, about partnership that breaks boundaries, about the radical choice to do what is right even when the law says otherwise. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the California hills and the wind whispered through the grass, you could almost hear two voices, intertwined and eternal, talking about cattle and crops and children and all the small, precious moments that make up a life fully lived and a love that never dies. The land remained solid and real, a testament to what Adelaide and Dalton had built together. Not just a ranch, but a legacy. Not just ownership, but freedom. Not just survival, but triumph. The deed stayed in the family archives, yellowed with age but still legible, bearing Adelaide's name in bold letters, proof that one cowboy had looked at the laws of his time and decided they were wrong. That one woman had taken the chance she was given and turned it into everything. And that their love had been powerful enough to change not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them.